Meet the people who make Burning Man happen.
Around the world.
Dreamers and doers.
The artists, freaks and fools.
Burning Man Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It is Burning Man Live. I'm Stuart Mangrum, and I'm here with our old friend, Andie Grace, Actiongrl. What's up, Andie?
I'm so fortunate to be old.
I meant seasoned friend. I meant like long-time friend. When I've introduced you before, I just assumed everybody knew who you were because you're kind of famous at Burning Man. But I just want to take a second here for you to tell us all how you got on this crazy train and got to the place where you are right now.
Oh, that's going to take so long. Let me sum up. I started burning in 1997, right after I came to San Francisco from the Midwest and heard it on the streets, as one does when you live here long enough. And I began quickly volunteering with the media team and later became assistant to Ms. Marion Goodell and helped her run the communications department for many years and helped her grow and others grow the regional network globally around the world. I served in that role for many, many years. I used to be the person that sent the Jackrabbit Speaks to your email every week. Sorry about the spam. You're welcome.
Oh, you were the real Jackrabbit?
No.
Okay.
No, sir. Marion's the real Jackrabbit, but there have been a number of emeriti as well. And I returned to the organization in 2018 after a hiatus of about 8 years and have been working in the Philosophical Center here with you and others sharing stories about Burning Man.
Yeah, that's when we started up the podcast together. You've been a stalwart supporter ever since. And lately, though, your storytelling and story collection has taken a different turn. The project that you're working on now, I'm super excited about, and I'm really, really happy to be able to share it with our listeners. You're working on an oral history project of Burning Man. Is that how you would describe it?
That is correct. We've loosely referred to it as the Legacy Oral History Project. We're trying to collect all the stories of who we are, who was there, what their stories are, and how it all began, and why. No big deal.
No, nothing huge. Burning Man stories. But sadly, we've been doing this long enough now that we're starting to lose people.
That's exactly it, right? You know, we have a lot of different media projects and the journal and all manner of storytelling about the organization so far, but the history of Burning Man is thousands of stories, right? And many of us are losing those memories, forgetting exactly how it went or what year it was, or we're losing people altogether every month, it feels like, in such a broad and beautiful community. So with so many tributaries in the story, to get our arms around it all, to hold it on to it for future scholars, for anybody who's trying to do things in service of this global cultural movement as we are, or even just studying it in terms of any individual aspect of it. This is a historical repository to try to offer to the world.
Now, you mentioned scholarship, and I know there's an academic model for collecting oral histories, and then there's also the more populist model of, say, StoryCorps, right? What background research did you do to come up with your method for how you were talking to people and how you're collecting these stories?
We absolutely, of course, looked at StoryCorps as well as a lot of storytelling organizations that we are in contact with, such as the Moth and different action-oriented or activist-oriented organizations who've captured their own oral history. ACT UP comes to mind, various art movements and museums, the Black Power archives. These are all examples of groups that have tried to hold oral histories or get their arms around oral histories, various universities and social and art movements. And we also consulted with several students whose focus is oral history and other organizations and looked at oralhistory.org literally has a very detailed how-to on how to collect these and preserve them for time.
You're collecting both audio and video, I know, and it's a mixture of field recordings and remote recordings for the people that we can't get to. We're going to be listening to some of the choice audio bits today, and I'm hoping this will turn into an ongoing series for the podcast because I know you're getting a lot. You've got a pretty long list. Where do you start? How do you decide where to start with a million stories in the big city?
Well, it's absolutely true. And every time we interview someone, 3 more names pop to the surface, right? So it's
Right.
been a collection from within, what I already knew of the organization, what we already knew, sitting down with those lists of people who began teams back in the day or people who built art back in the day. It's not just organizationally focused, although it does track, we are trying to get our arms around how did that team begin? Why did somebody start doing that? And how did it turn into what we see today? But it's also, those first DJs and those artists that haven't built anything out there in 25 years, but were there when, and trying to get to the heart of how it became what it is now. We are collecting audio and video because there are many ways that you can present such an archive. It can be full-length videos, it can be clips. Certainly this podcast is going to be a great way that we could share some of these awesome stories. However, some of the folks that we have sadly already lost, and some casual collection of storytelling that we began before this formalized as a process is also part of this as well. So there are some gems and highlights from people that we just can't get anymore.
Well, I think that's a great point for us to jump into this. So we picked 5 clips, is that right?
Yeah, 5. It was hard. We've been back and forth on this for several weeks because there's a lot of gold in here. And it just includes people who haven't been back in so long. And even as a person who worked in communications and was supposed to know so much about Burning Man, boy, am I learning a lot from all of these people.
Well, I actually am too. This first clip that we're going to listen to is from an old-time cacophonist who precedes me by far in the movement, was a member of the Suicide Club, was out there for the first burns, and actually started the Lamplighters. His name is Steve Mobia. I love this story you captured about his time with the San Francisco Suicide Club.
Well, there was this guy, Gary Warren, and he had a bookstore in the Inner Sunset. And I was a big fan of Fellini and Bergman. And I think he was running one of the two. I think he was running Hour of the Wolf, which is a great Ingmar Bergman film. And I struck a good conversation with him, and he told me about the Communiversity. And the Suicide Club initially was a class in the Communiversity. And I didn't go to the first event. Chris de Monterey went to the first event. You should interview him, by the way. But I went to a lot of the early events. And that became my life for, 2 or 3 years. It seemed like there were events every week. It was interesting. And what appealed to me about it was that it was making the city into a dreamscape. We did things that, to me, were very dreamlike, and also exploring abandoned buildings, which often I dream about. In fact, I had, for Communiversity, I started these dream exploration groups. And I went to a lot of, like the Harkness Hospital that the Suicide Club used a lot, into the Panhandle there near the DMV. It was a hospital, and it was abandoned, and they had the operating rooms and everything. Everything was, we snuck in and did all kinds of events in there. But the dream excursions, I wanted one person to tell the other person a dream, and then you create a Frankenstein dream in the operating room, and everyone would be watching from where the interns were down into the operating theater. And then people would enact these dreams that were composed of multiple parts from different people. I actually did something very similar to that in 2005 for the Psyche theme. That's a different,
the Dreamer, right?
The Dreamer,
Yes,
right.
yes.
That was, I persuaded Larry to finally do a theme based on dreams. So we came up with the Psyche theme, and I got Pepe back to Burning Man, actually. I recommended to Larry that Pepe be great at building a giant head. Anyway, we did an Awakening of the Dreamer ritual as the sun went down, and the dream workers would get together, and we constructed a Frankenstein dream based on the dreams that were shared in the head that day. And then it was acted out in front of the dreamer, and then the blindfold was pulled off the dreamer, and I got anyone in the crowd there to say, "Wake up, wake up." And then the eyes would start sizzling, and then Pepe started a fire in the middle of the dreamer head. And then people would get going and play music and such. So the Dream Excursion thing was going along parallel with the Suicide Club. Well, there were so many events that I can't really, I did some.
Tell me about one of your events that you did.
Well, the one that John talks about all the time was Decoy Street. And Decoy Street was based on, at that time, which was, I guess, 1977, they had a police program where the police would impersonate street people. And they would look like they'd gotten into a fight or gotten shot or something, and they were lying on the street. I was coming back. I was living on Minna Street at the time, near the old Greyhound station. And there was a guy lying on the street, and his wallet was almost out on the sidewalk. It was like halfway out of his pocket. I didn't pick up right away that it was a cop. I just thought, yeah, I got to find some help for this guy. And I went into the motel nearby, and I said, there's a guy out there who looks like he's in bad shape. And they said, oh, he's a policeman. Just leave him alone. And that really annoyed me, that there's someone right outside my apartment that, oh yeah, I was told he was doing his job. So I dressed up, I put on a cape and a skull mask and went out and tried to help him up. And he was pretending not to, go away, go. And I said, where do you live? Do you live around here? And perhaps just to annoy me or get me to go away, he said Alaska, which is a strange thing. So I thought, oh, I know you'll feel at home. And I went to a nearby market and got a bag of crushed ice and came back and poured it on his supposed wound. He had a cut in his pants, and he jumped up right away as soon as the ice hit his skin. And a woman from across the street, who I guess was pretending to be a hooker, ran over and said, and flashed her badge and said, you get out of here. You're interfering with law enforcement. So I had this idea that we should all impersonate street people. And we went to the Tenderloin. We all met, and there was all kinds of exaggerated caricatures of street people, and we all had plaques over it because someone might mistake us for the real thing. So we all had plaques over around our neck saying we're decoy street, like decoy preacher, and and I think I was a decoy innocent bystander. No, there was another one who was I was the molested nightclub owner or something. I had a fancy kind of glittery jacket thing that I wore. Anyway, we all kind of were on this one block and would occasionally arrest each other and flash badges at each other. And, people had money and they'd pass it from one to the other. The preacher had cocaine in his Bible, a little hole in his Bible that he could dispense cocaine from. And at that time we had a big hearse, an actual hearse that was the Suicide Club car. And it ended with the hearse coming around and these guys coming out and arresting all of us. And we all got into the hearse and departed. So that was one of those things. But there were so many events. But Gary Warren died premature. He died at 35, I think. So it was really early in life. And that's a whole other story. There's so much. But there was a memorial at Fort Funston in the bunkers there. And then Gene Mashofsky and Elena Fronte had an idea for an event to honor Gary Warren. Kirby Cove, is that what it's called? It's across the Golden Gate Bridge. They had rented the space for the whole evening. And Elaine was a lawyer, so she had the people who wanted to go to this go to her law office and fill out wills. And even though it seemed like an absurd thing to do, people really got into it and put it in what they wanted to be remembered for, what they thought was important in their life and that sort of thing. But that was the first Cacophony event where people are buried alive for 20 minutes. And at the end, the people resurrected. We're supposed to go through this wonderful tunnel. It's like a cylindrical tunnel that goes out to the beach. And we were going to have a big clown out there. Because Gary wrote the story called The Clown at Midnight. So we were going to have the clown appear. But there were logistic things. So in a lot of these events, there's always, you just can't cover all the bases. And in this case, the resurrected people had to become pallbearers for the newly dead because coffins are heavy, and the original pallbearers got tired of carrying them. You need 4 people to carry these, even if they're simple coffins, they're heavy with a body in there. So I had to resurrect people and put them to work carrying coffins. But that was the first Cacophony event.
That's a great story. So who's next? Lexie Tillotson. Who's Lexie?
Well, Lexie is a friend of the community from way, way back. Harley K. Dubois is involved in this project and helping us identify who's who from back then. And she insisted that we have to talk to Lexie, who was one of the early greeters, just a very early participant back in the days when you kind of knew everybody that was there because it wasn't that many people. Her partner was a man named Bob Stahl, who built a lot of the shade structures out there that, in fact, are the ones we still use today for the organization. Those flat ones that you see, he designed those.
Wow.
So she has a lot of connections, and she had a fine and funny time finding Burning Man the first time she came in 1994.
And I went the first year, which I'm pretty sure was 94. And because my friend Julia said I was at a cafe and I got a little tag off a flyer and I've heard about this thing and it's in the desert and we should go. And I said, I have law school, but if you want to drive my Volvo and I can sleep in the back, let's go. She said, great. We got our stuff and we didn't really, well, she's the only person that had any camping gear and it was from her dad. So it was really old. It was like a little pup tent and stuff, but she had a little army thing. I don't know how we cooked ramen. It was funny. So she was together. I pretty much brought nothing. It felt like we were there for a week, but I think we went up on Friday before the burning, which would have been on Sunday, I think. Maybe it was on Monday. No, Sunday, because then you still have the day to drive home and get your act together. So she just had these instructions. I guess you had to make phone calls back then because it was the olden days. She had to make phone calls and then there would be a message and that would tell you where you had to go next. And we were supposed to meet at Bruno's because Bruno was going to tell us where to go, which I think is funny now that I think about it because Bruno hated hippies on drugs. But somehow at Bruno's there was going to be somebody there who would then tell you how to get onto the playa. We didn't know it was called that then yet. So we drove up there. Julia drove. We took my friend Ron, who hates camping, and we drove and drove and drove. And then we got to Bruno's and it was closed because it was 2 a.m, probably. Nobody said anything about that. And we're in the middle of nowhere. We didn't know what to do because there were no signs anywhere. And we drove up and down the road after, what's the road that you get to the 3 mile, whatever that road is, 437, I forget. Past Planet X, there's like a gravel pit over there on the left. We kind of drove in there thinking maybe it was there. It's all dark and there's nothing. There's no lights. Gerlach has got like 3 houses and everybody's asleep. So we just kept driving up and down the road trying to figure out what to do. And finally we saw this stick and it had this tiny little black flag. It was like 3 inches long. It wasn't like a flag. It was just like a marker, a road marker. I have no idea if that flag actually was put there as a marker for anybody at all, but we decided that that was the marker that we would go on the playa at that point because we'd been driving around for about an hour just trying to figure out what to do. Another car came, so we just followed that car, and that car was going really fast. So it was kicking up all this dust in the middle of the night, and we had no idea because we were getting there for the first time in the dark, and none of us had been to a playa like that or a flat. We'd never, it was new. So we follow this guy. We're driving behind them, trying to keep up, but a little worried. But of course they have to be going to this thing because who else is out in the middle of nowhere? So we just keep following them and there's all this dust. And then out of the dust there's 2 naked guys and like a railroad crossing thing. I think that's where we were supposed to pay, were the naked guys, but we just followed the car because we thought we're never going to get there. We just got to go. It doesn't matter. We're just going to follow because this is our only chance. So we followed the car. We just drove right past the naked guys and drove for a while longer. Like, it was still a few minutes. I don't know, those naked guys just standing out there. What the hell? Like, we didn't see any cars or anything. Now that I think about it, that was kind of strange. I hope this guy's on water. So we follow this car, and then the dust sort of opens up, like opening the curtain, and then we see a neon man, and it's just right in front of us because the man was on the ground at that time. So we're just parked right in front of it, and we're like, holy crap. And then it's like a parking lot, sort of. We just see all these other cars that are parked in front of the man. We just got out and looked around and thought, what the fuck do we do now? And we probably just started setting up our camp right there, like to go to sleep or something. But Julia was the only one that knew how to set anything up, because I've been camping, but I really don't know how to do anything at that point. Talk about survival. We did bring enough water, though. She had the instructions. So we followed them. Not enough food, but we found friends later, which was great. When the sun came up, which probably happened 20 minutes later, it was like we woke up on the moon. It was just it was the craziest thing. It was just awe-inspiring. That's all I can say. It was just, everybody just took it was like a deep breath. I don't know, I did. Wow, we're on a totally another planet, and this is in America. I didn't even know this existed here. What the hell is this place? And that's when the cracks, like everything that's so iconic now about it, just, it was like being on another planet. It was awe-inspiring, but confusing too, because we were kind of fish out of water.
So our next clip is one that I absolutely insisted that we had to include in this program because I love this story so much. It is from a fellow who was another of the very earliest participants in Burning Man, a guy who came to us by way of machine art performance group known as Survival Research Laboratories, and for years was our pyro guy until he wasn't. Kimric Smythe, also known as the guy who designed the Never Was Hall. Have you ever seen that giant Victorian house?
Love it.
On a steam tractor. More Burning Man cred than you can imagine. This story he tells, this is about a year that, until I heard this story, I just referred to that as the year of the best burn ever, because there was a moment when it literally turned the night into day. And then when I found out why, I was, oh shit.
Yeah, Kimric was the pyro guy back in the day. That's the man you want to stand behind when you're not sure if everything is particularly safe. We had our janky days, didn't we? I interviewed Kimric first in this project, actually. I went to his accordion shop in Petaluma, California.
Yes.
So the sound is a little mucky. There are cars going by, but I couldn't resist sharing this.
You heard that right, folks. His accordion shop.
The problem was that nobody was ever letting me know that they had completely changed the way the man had been rigged. So it's like, oh wait, suddenly it's on a 20-foot platform? So how do we get up there? Oh, you're going to have a crane and whatnot and stuff. So the crane would show up and the guy's like, why am I here for an hour? And I'm like, no, it's going to take all afternoon. Things like that would happen. I realized I'm good at managing my own affairs. And since I had worked the year before, I was just going to do it the same way I'd done it that way. I had my crew. So when people outside would change stuff, it looked like at that point, it was a lot of the people that were better at doing professional art things where they literally would write a whole thing, write everything down. There would be meeting. And I hadn't done things like that and wasn't even familiar with the idea of that. I knew it's things that other people did, but it didn't occur to me that it reflected on what I was doing. Stuff like that would keep happening. And I didn't ever go I need to sit back and figure out, change my method. And I never really did. So I think the event changed, I didn't change. And I think that started causing just more and more friction. One of the last straws was when we were getting ready to burn it. And that was the year that it literally just blew the fuck up. And that was not my doing. Chris Casorla had bought a bunch of, he would show up because I had no real way of getting fireworks. And so he would literally show up the day of or the day before and goes, okay, I was at Mega Blast or whatever, some pyro things. I bought a whole fuck ton of expired shit for you. And so the night before we'd open up and I'd set off some of the stuff to see like, what even does this stuff do? And I remember he shows up literally while we're rigging and he goes, dude, I got this Korean War aerial illumination flare. This thing it's meant to be dropped out of an airplane on a parachute so that a plane could take photographs at night. You would drop it over the battlefield and then fly over real fast and just start snapping photos. It was like a continual flash mold, just insanely. It's like the sun coming up. And I'm like, oh man, we'll put it in the man's head. It'll be super cool. It'll just be like this radiating white light coming out of his head. And because he's like that sort of lantern structure, it's going to look insane. It's going to be like, you know, it's literally, you'll see this beam coming up out of his head into the sky. It'll be very, you know, philosophical. Well, we were still rigging, and I had my guys still rigging, and that was the second year we had the guy that was going to be on fire. And Crimson kept going like, well, what's the ETA? What's the ETA? And I go, dude, it's going to be done when we're done. It's only like around 8:30. It's not even 9 o'clock. And I go, we're probably about a half an hour out. And she kept pushing. And then finally I'm walking by and they're suiting up the guy in the fire stuff. And I'm like, why are you suiting up? We're still like an hour or something out. And they're like, oh no, it's just he wants to get ready. And so my dad's up on the platform. I still got guys rigging fireworks down at the base. There's still vehicles in the perimeter, like vans and work vehicles and stuff. Crimson just says, go. The guy runs up, and because before I go, okay, because she always wanted to light the fuses. So I go, okay, you need to light this fuse and this fuse. And the trick is, the quick match, you use different types of fuse to get things to light at different times. Green fuse burns like 1.5 feet a minute, I think. And the quick match, which I had to hand make because it was illegal for me to buy it. So everything was carefully timed with lengths of fuses. So I go, you need to light this fuse right here. If you light it up here, you're going to light the quick match. You're going to screw up the delays because you would see one thing and there would be several fuses. So like the man's head would go, like the flare would go. I had timed it so it would die down because the guy he said, oh yeah, it burns for like 30 seconds or something like that. So it'd be 30 seconds and then all the fountains and the other things on the man would go. Everything was sequenced with different lengths of fuse. So he runs up there and is standing there on fire and it lights in multiple spots. You see him literally just run. He's on fire. He doesn't even care. He's running away. It just goes up, immediately lights the flare. The flare's going, stops shooting, and then that flare just, as far as I can tell, just blows up because I think it had cracks or something in it from being roughly handled. And the man vanishes. I mean, it's like you can't see anything. It's just this white blob. If you watch the video, you can see my guys are ignoring this. They're still rigging. They're trying to salvage and light the stuff that they have rigged because it was all a color sequence of different things going off. There's vehicles in the perimeter, and there was a photo that I saw, and you can see this burning chunk going like maybe, God, like 100 yards out. And you can see a person standing right at its trajectory. And then I was at the photo exhibit and you see the guy, I realized that guy was a photographer and he has this photo. And you see this thing that looks like it's been photoshopped in like a cartoon meteorite coming at him with the man in the background.
What do we got next, Actiongrl?
Well, up next, I spoke with someone, again referred by Hartley K. Dubois. This was Denzil Meyers, who was there back in the early days. He was a participant who found his way through the Cacophony Society. We talked a lot about those wacky conditions that existed when everybody went to Burning Man in the desert. He helped Chris Campbell build the man. He worked on Pepe Ozan's operas, which were a phenomenal big gathering during the event back in the late 90s. So Denzil had some fun stories as well.
The other thing that happened around that time was the first Cheap Suit Santa event.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, the SantaCon. That was another Cacophony thing, and said, hey, order your cheap Santa suits from this address, and here's where we're going to meet. I mean, that's all you ever got. No social media or text messaging. But we also had an Evil Elves workshop. And that was at somebody's house in Oakland, and they had a bunch of weird toys and stuff that we could cut up and re-glue gun back together. And we said, okay, we're making toys for kids to hand out. And somebody had made a bunch of wrapping paper, which is basically like single sheets of paper with a handgun stenciled on them. So, these are the things that would happen. Like, yeah, there had more people there. Peter and Lizzie and some other people that I still know them from that one event, and then that's it. You're connected forever. I do have a toy from that day that Jerry James made, and I don't know why I still have it or why it fascinated me, but basically it is like a G.I. Joe body, a little one, like this big, with a moose's head on top. Somehow, the way he glued the moose head on top, the spine is perfect. You can tell that the articulation of the thing, it's just right on. And that always pleased me. Yeah, I still have it. When we went to that event, that first SantaCon, it was crazy. Running around downtown, running in and out of restaurants, in and out of bars, 20, 30 Santas all at the same time. And then we heard, that group went up into the department store and they went up on the roof and they got kicked out and they wrecked a bunch of stuff coming down. We were like, what? So you're just hearing about these things happening while you're still out in the street. I do remember Pine. We were on Pine Street downtown, and a taxi stopped at the red light, and 3 of us just got in. We just got in. There was a passenger, and the driver was our friend Jeff Grove. And we said, Jeff, what are you doing? He was like, whoa. We went, and then the passenger was like, WTF. And then he took off up the street. And then we got out, of course. And so all that was super hilarious and fun. And I'm not like a big drinker. I'm not usually a big drug person. So it wasn't like I was wasted during any of these things. But they were still totally crazy. That night culminated in a negative way. We were all waiting for a Geary bus because it was time for us to go. And there was still a lot of us there. It was a little bit late. And so one of those double-length Geary buses come up, and we get on and we take over most of both ends of it. And yeah, once again, it was pretty rowdy. For some reason, somebody had a gun. I don't know if it was a real gun, if it was a loaded gun, but somebody had a gun, and that was obviously not cool. Somebody vomited on the inside of the bar, of the bus doors, and that, the thing. So we're driving up Geary, and then we noticed that the driver's not stopping at the stops. And then there's a cop car behind us. And then there's 3 cop cars behind us. And then there's 5 cop cars behind us. And we're like, oh shit, what the hell is happening? So we get out into the avenue somewhere, and the bus pulls into a big gas station or something, and cops completely surround our bus. And we're like, oh fuck, now what? And they make us get off the bus one at a time. And there's a guy there, I think from the department store, because of whatever vandalism stuff they were complaining about. And so you get off the bus, there's 3 cops and this manager of the department store, and they say, pull your beard down. And you pull your beard down. They're like, no, not him. Just goes back up. Next, pull your beard down. And so they're checking everyone out to see who they're going to arrest. And a couple people got arrested. I think Chris Radcliffe got arrested, even though he swore that he was not the one to blame for whatever it was. We said, Chris, you're almost always to blame. So, maybe this is fine. A couple people got arrested. And then we're 40 Santas hanging around in this gas station. And I said to the cop, what's happening? What's going on? Are we all under arrest? And he says, all right, all the rest of your Santas are free to go. When do you get to hear that? Never. You never get to hear people say stuff like that. That was our last negative action of the evening. We all trounced over to the Palace of Legion of Honor, I think, which was out there somewhere. No, it was something else, because anyway, the San Francisco Chronicle was having a holiday party, and we just walked in and crashed it, and they got super pissed. They were so mad. They had zero patience for like 40 drunken Santas crashing their thing. We thought it might be fun for them. They were not receiving it as an act of service. And so they threatened to call the cops. And so we just all kind of then dispersed off into the ether. But that moment, that year around that time was really good because I was dating this girl, and right before that, she said, "Oh, it's Halloween. What are we going to do for Halloween?" And I said, "Man, I hate Halloween. Halloween is bullshit." I had something crappy to say. She was like, "Who says that? What's wrong with you? How could you hate Halloween? You have some problem." And it actually struck me. And I was like, wait a minute. I think she's right. Maybe I should check that out. I went home and I thought about it for a while, and I realized that Halloween somewhere for me was not that you put on a disguise, but that when you put on a costume, it actually reveals a part of you that you normally try to keep hidden. That's what was freaking me out. And as soon as I brought that to consciousness, I said, well, that's obviously bullshit. That's no way to live your life. And right there, the whole thing cracked open and went the other way. So probably that Santa thing, if you want to count that as a costume, that was kind of my first thing.
All right. And for this last clip, we went to another OB, original burner, about as original as you can get. This is Larry Harvey's brother, Stewart, who has so many great stories to tell. He's going to, in this clip, talk about building temples.
Stewart Harvey is Larry Harvey's brother, so he heard a lot of the conversation on the phone when he'd check in with his brother about how things were going. Oh, that thing you do on the beach, I'll come down for that. And he spent a lot of time with this community building the things, and then in the days that transitioned to the desert, he himself is also a fantastic photographer, and he's been attending for a really long time. So he has a lot of great photos as well. I talked to him in his Portland photography studio.
Yeah, in this clip, he talks about building a temple with the artist David Best, who, after creating the temple phenomenon in Black Rock City, has gone on to do them in a number of trouble spots around the world that were in need of some healing. This story is about the temple that was built in Derry, formerly Londonderry, in Northern Ireland.
And I love the temple. David's a great friend of mine, and I was on a temple project with them in Dair Ireland in 2015. That was my best Burning Man experience.
Tell me why.
Well, you know, Derry was kind of ground zero for the Troubles, and there was still a great Catholic-Protestant division, still exists, still there. I was invited to come. I thought my role was going to be as a photographer, but I landed in Belfast, got a coach over to Derry. I had to take a cab to get across the River Foyle. There's the city side and the water side, and then north of town is what they call the bog side, and that's the poor Catholic area. And the water side is the predominantly Protestant area. I got in this cab to go over to the place where we were staying. St. Column's House. It was kind of a retreat center. I get in the cab and the guy looks at me and he said, "Oh, you're one of them Yanks." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well," he says, "it was a fine idea, but you built it in the wrong place." I said, "Well, how do you mean?" He says, "Well, listen, the side of the river that we're going to, well, that's the Protestant side of the river. So the Catholics are not going to come over there. But that piece of property up there on the hill where you're building that thing, well, that's owned by an old Catholic IRA family. So the Protestants aren't going to go up there. Nobody's going to come." And that stayed with me all week long. We were building that thing. Nobody's going to come. And the first day that it was opened, you know, it opens on a Saturday. There were, 700 or 800 people showed up. But they were mostly people that were connected to the project or city folk, you know, whatever. So they didn't tell me everything I needed to know. And then I met two guys, Donick Ryan, who's still, I'll see probably out there this year, and Darmot on the crew. Donick lived in a little town called Glynn, which is down on the Shannon. He and Darmot decided they were going to go down there and visit Donick's family. And they invited me to go with them. It was a fabulous trip. I had a great time. But still, is anything going to happen when we come back? And we get back on Friday, and we said, well, let's go up on the hill. But we can't get up the hill because there's hundreds of people going up one side of the street and hundreds of people coming back down. There must have been 30,000, 40,000 people at the burn. So turns out they came after all. It was a wonderful experience. It was by far my best burn because it was everything Burning Man was supposed to be about. It was healing this rift between Protestant and Catholic. They were working side by side on the build. We had 40 Irish on the build. There was an enormous amount of community involvement. I went in town. There was a couple that were there visiting. They're from England. I'd met them on the playa. And they came over to visit. We went into town together. And we were visiting the big Episcopal church that was in Derry. And we went in and introduced ourselves to the priest and the ladies there. And I noticed up on the wall, there was a big sign that said photography. There was a fee to do pictures in the church. They'd probably done because they were just annoyed by all the photographers. And he had taken us out into the sanctuary to just sort of tell us about this or that. And I looked up at that sign and I said, oh, well, when I have a little more time, I'll have to come over and buy a photo pass and take some pictures. And he said, oh, my boy, take all the pictures you want. That was the community really embraced us. It was a wonderful experience. I've had others. I mean, we were in Parkland, Florida for that build. I find that these regional events, that's it, the regionals, in many ways, I feel like that's been the most successful part of Burning Man, is that it's transmitting that culture around the world and allowing it to adapt to a variety of cultures. I haven't been to Africa Burn. I want to go to Africa Burn. That would be really wonderful.
Have you gotten to attend any?
Well, like I said, I did the one in Derry. I've been to 2 or 3 stateside, like Parkland, Florida was one. Special things, not regional so much, but just special kinds of events, mostly around David's work.
How were things received in Parkland?
It was similar. And the students, we had a number of the students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School helped on the build. And that was very interesting because some of them had been really traumatized. I remember these 3 young guys. They never left each other's side. They did everything as this group of 3. It had a devastating effect on some of those kids. But the build gave them something that it was not only them, but their parents were involved. And the thing about David's temples is there's hammer swinger stuff, guys that can actually do tools. That's one form. But there's also all this decorative stuff that he does. He brings all these little pieces, and you take a 4x8 piece of plywood and people glue and make a mosaic out of it, and that becomes the floor. So you got 20 or 30 pieces of 4x8 plywood that's all been decorated. The kids can do that. The parents can do that. It's a very uniting kind of experience. I really think that's the essence of that community participation. Give somebody something to do. That's how you get involved. You can't get involved just watching it. You gotta pick up a hammer.
What's next, Andy Grace, with this project? Who are you talking to next?
Oh my goodness.
Are you going to talk to Stuart Mangrum? I've heard he's got some stories.
I already interviewed Stewart Mangrum.
Oh, that's right. You were talking earlier about about remembering differently. I remembered that differently. Okay. No, seriously, what's ahead? Do you have enough people to talk to in the year to come?
Up next, the list is 165 or so people now. We're kind of starting chronologically and are taking opportunities that might be more rare, such as when people are traveling in from out of the country, etc. We're doing it digitally where we have to, but I'm trying to be in person if we can. We're chasing all kinds of departments and threads. There's mystery folks that we're trying to figure out where they went. Basically, if you think that you should be on this list and why isn't my voice in here, I'm probably coming for you soon. It's hard to imagine, really, as the story gets deeper and more complex down the line, how we would ever stop recording it, really. The number of departments, teams, all the cultural, the regional events, you could go on forever into the history of Burning Man.
And, I'll just point out that over the course of this podcast over the last couple of years, we have done some oral history episodes. We've sat down with some great storytellers who are on this list, and they're already out there in our back catalog. So if, for instance, you wanted to go to burningman.org/podcasts, you might pull up episode 41, which is my conversation with Michael, Danger Ranger. You might want to pull up episode number 53, which is a great conversation with Dave X, Pyro Guy, whose stripper name is Sweaty Dynamite. Episode 58 with Candace, Evil Pippi, 69 with John Turner. There's just a lot of great history in there already. I want to thank all of our guests, even though they were interviewed a while back. They're all here with us right now. And a million appreciations to you, Actiongrl Andie Grace, for doing this important work.
It's an honor and a privilege.
And thanks to all of you who help keep us on the, can I say airwaves? We're not really on the airwaves. What are the podcast airwaves? They're just the waves. Burning Man Live is a production of the nonprofit Burning Man Project, available free of charge and without commercial interruption wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. Hey, if you want to nominate someone to be on the show or get interviewed for that Burning Man Oral History Project, you significant piece of history, you, drop us a line at live@burningman.org. That's live@burningman.org. If you want to cruise some of those back issues I was talking about, the URL is burningman.org/podcasts, where you can also find full transcripts, show notes, and all kinds of other surprises. And, of course, if you're in the giving mood, drop over to donate.burningman.org, and we will be warmly appreciative of your tax-deductible donation. I'm warmly appreciative of all the people who helped put this show, this season, this crazy, wonderful thing together. My senior producer and story editor, Michael Valve, our rockstar producers, Actiongrl, K-Bot, Allie W, our engineer, Tyler B, our administrative magician and resident geologist, DJ Toyle. Thanks to the comms team for getting the word out. Thanks to the philanthropic engagement team for keeping the lights on. Thanks to Larry Harvey for starting this whole crazy train. Thanks to Michael for conning me into jumping on board. Thanks to Harley K. Dubon, Marion Goodell for hiring me back onto the crazy train 10 years ago. And thanks to all of you for listening, for telling a friend, for giving us a positive review, for subscribing. I promise we'll give you some more shows coming up real soon. Just stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.